Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's web seminar, The Top 7 Challenges in Test Automation, sponsored by Perfecto by Perforce, and featuring their chief evangelist, Eran Kinsbrunner, as our speaker today. I'm your host from TechWell, Beth Romanek. Thanks for joining us. Before I hand it over to our speaker, let me explain this console you see in front of you. All three panels on your screen can be moved around and resized. At the bottom of your console, you'll also see a widget toolbar. By clicking the circular widget in the middle, the one that looks like two pieces of paper, you can download a PDF of the speaker's slides. If you have any technical issues, please let us know by typing in the questions and answers panel on the left. This is also how you can submit questions for the speaker. We will have a Q&A session at the end, so feel free to ask questions throughout the presentation. And finally, for your best viewing experience, please close any unnecessary applications you have running in the background. This web seminar is being recorded and will be made available to watch on demand. Once the recording is ready, we'll send you an email with instructions about how you can watch the presentation. And with that, I'd like to hand it over to our speaker, Eran Kinsbrunner.
Thank you, Beth. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Truly excited to be here today, talking about the top challenges in test automation following a very thorough research that Perfecto recently conducted and found some, I would say, disturbing but also positive things that I want to go through and guide you through. As Beth mentioned, I am a chief evangelist for Perfecto, which is a Perforce company, blogger and speaker, nearly 20 years in the industry of software development and testing. If you aren't following me by now, feel free to do so, and we can continue the conversation also after this webinar. In today's agenda, obviously, I'm going to feature this test automation, state of test automation report that Perfecto by Perforce conducted, but kind of provide you with a recipe to how you can tackle the challenges. Also, first understand what they are, what are the root cause for these challenges, but also how you can proactively either avoid or overcome them if you also are experiencing some of them. So before I get started with the survey, as in most of my presentations, I'm trying to put everyone on the same page with how I define continuous testing. So I define continuous testing as a process that teams, developers, testers can be SDETs and business testers, are conducting continuously at scale to identify through high valuable test cases the most important business risk associated with all code changes that are happening. And with my experience and through my customer base, which I'm engaging with continuously, we see individuals, developers doing 7 pull requests a day. So think about different sizes of these development teams making so much disruption to a specific code base or repository that simply mandates you to do this continuous testing effort just to mitigate risks, but also do it with high valuable test cases that are continuously updated as your product evolves, as well as the target market, the target platforms, mobile and web, that are being used. So when we talk about test automation at scale, why is that important? Okay. When we talk about continuous testing, the scale here is important for various reasons. We need to look at fast feedback, and fast feedback, it's not just about getting the feedback from code changes that were implemented, in a timely manner, but it also needs to be on the right coverage from a platform perspective, whether they are mobile or web. So think about high value test automation scenarios, the ones that you really care mostly about, and the ones that are really attached to your recent code changes, running also on the most relevant desktop browser permutations and mobile platforms. When you combine both the scale and the value of test automation, and you run them in parallel across your pipeline, obviously you get a very fast feedback, because the execution is also being the time to execute is also reduced, because you're doing parallel testing with the right permutations. So when you talk about continuous testing, I'm not talking about 100% test coverage. I'm talking about continuous testing of high-value test cases to identify business risks on the right amount of platforms. When you do it right, you get fast feedback, you execute in time, and I will soon or later on in this webinar show you a model of a real useful pipeline that you can implement to really bring this slide and this concept into reality. So when we talk about, and again, this is regardless of the survey, but the survey did validate a few of the things that are presented in this slide. So when you talk about test automation and you think about challenges, these are I would say, the top ones that comes to mind. These are the top ones that customers, practitioners that I'm interviewing and working with them on a daily basis are reporting. And for those of you online, I'm also managing a Slack channel called Test Automation Experts for Web and Mobile. And I constantly see in the conversation, in the discussion, things that are attributed to the exact same root causes or the exact same buckets. One of them is obviously the automation skill set. Do we have within a feature team and a squad the right skill set that is divided into different practitioners with the right technologies in hand for them to deliver this high value test automation? Okay, because this is a huge challenge. If it's not aligned with the business requirements and everything, obviously it means that you are not going to have your team capable of developing advanced automation scenarios. You'll definitely get into maintenance issues. You won't be able to do it in time, and you will result in escape defects. Okay, and this becomes even major or more critical when you think about a siloed approach, when testing is simply done outside of the development squad or feature team. So you can see here that I actually drew some arrows between different challenges, because in some organizations you will see one of these challenges as a standalone, but in many cases one of these challenges would actually be a root cause of another or maybe few other challenges. Okay, one challenge that well, I'm not seeing it a lot, but it's still a challenge and it's still an issue, is the ability to design your app for testability. Okay, from a development standpoint, how the development team think about quality when they are writing the next feature. From a testing perspective, it's often a huge challenge, because when we think about implementing a story point and converting it into, whether you're using BDD or other method, converting a user story or a user journey into a test case when your system is not designed for testability, you do not have access to all the APIs and stuff like that. Obviously, you are in the dark, and this delays the entire testing activities. So just to summarize, we see here few challenges. In my mind, these are the most commonly seen challenges. One of them, or few of them, can cause other challenges or pains to be more visible. At the end of the day, and after this webinar, I want at least to give you some advices, some practical tips, so you can try and address at least few of them, if not all. So going into more specifics and looking at the research that Perfecto conducted, so we interviewed a majority of enterprises with target roles of executives, QA directors, test automation leaders, and what we have learned is a few things. In this first slide, what we have learned is that the responsibility of software testing within the org, the majority is done by internal QA team, and testing resources within the feature teams, which is good. Okay, when you have a QA team which is internal, it's not siloed, and it's actually embedded into feature teams, this obviously breaks some of the barriers between QA and dev, puts everyone mostly on the same page from a test implementation perspective. You have very good alignment. But you can see the remaining of the chart, which shows that there are other resources that are external to the feature teams. They are kind of waiting and are dependent on the developers to throw them the new binaries, the build, and only then they can start testing. And obviously, that's kind of a bad practice. So the implications of a siloed approach that we have seen in the market is obviously causing sometimes escape defects due, by the way, it's not just end late feedback, but it's also due to late feedback. Okay, a lot of manual activities because simply the test engineers do not have the sufficient time to automate within the cycle. And obviously there can be misalignments because the feature is already implemented and you only then start seeing all the features in action. It's quite late to go back, and sometimes things are getting lost in translation. So obviously the recommendations to this challenge or to this research finding is to build as much as possible a mixed team approach where you have both dev and QA, and some of the responders do have this structured, but it doesn't need to be kind of a superficial or virtual feature team. It needs to be something that is very, very real, supported by executives, by the management, because if you do build a feature team but still the QA is separated, is not part of the decision-making process, obviously is not really part of the overall activities. So you want to build a true mixed teams for dev, QA, product owners, whatever roles that can support this specific sprint or software iteration needs to work together. Okay, you want to align the feature teams on software iterations in advance. So if there is a very good visibility into what's coming in the next 3 sprints, assuming you are doing, let's say, 2 weeks software releases, if you can see up until, I don't know, 2 months ahead, okay, as a QA engineer, you are in a good spot, in a better spot, if you like, to plan ahead your testing infrastructure. You can understand where you have gaps, where you have automation challenges, where you need a new environment to be set up, and many more. So obviously visibility is a huge challenge today and also a bottleneck, and you can resolve it by aligning with product owners and R&D management so you can build your own QA plans. Finally, and going back to the previous slide of the challenges around skill set, match the technologies with your individual. So if you have a developer who is strong in C#, obviously, and you are developing a mobile application, make him use Appium, okay? If you're forcing to use, I don't know, XUI test, which is done in a Swift or Objective-C different language, he won't feel comfortable, and it will take him a ramp up. Maybe he will succeed, eventually he will succeed to write test cases in such language, but the better you can get technology access to your individuals based on their skill set, you will be obviously more successful. Test automation, this is just a slide which in my mind shows the previous 2 slides that, automation is one of the biggest bottlenecks within DevOps teams today. That's what's slowing down organizations from being more innovative and releasing faster. I think that today, if you ask the majority of organizations, you won't see the reality of CI/CD in action. You will see kind of CI and a journey towards CD. There are a lot of manual activities that are still happening in the pipeline. One of them, or the major one of them, is the automation testing. So these are just few numbers showing the percentage of automation within the organization, and you do not see a lot of organizations that have over 75% test automation for their project. The majority actually have much lower. And to do continuous testing and build automation within the cycle, numbers must be obviously higher. So when automation is not as expected and the coverage or the percentage isn't high, the left is what's being experienced by DevOps teams. Obviously, the recommendation is because some of the reasons behind slow or reduced number of test automation coverage is also around test automation flakiness. Okay, you might have developed a larger scope of test automation, but you either didn't develop it correctly, or you developed it and lost track on maintenance, and it became flaky and irrelevant, kind of chunking out of your overall test automation coverage. So there are few contributions to the test automation percentage, and if you want to have a very, I would say 70 and above test automation coverage, you want to build the automation from the foundation perspective really solid. You only want to build automation that fits into the CI slowly after it's been validated across multiple platforms, and obviously grow on top of that. But I think the major point behind that, because the start small and grow, we have been saying it for many years now, but the main point that isn't well accepted or met is the analyze and improve. Okay, people are kind of developing and forgetting about their test automation assets, and they are becoming either flaky, irrelevant, outdated. And by the way, when I talk about outdated, it can be both the test automation environments and also the scenarios themselves. So obviously, starting small, building and validating your test automation suites, merging it slowly into the CI, and continuously making audits is the best way to go. Obviously, when the automation isn't high, continuous delivery is not happening. And you can see here the average release cycles. We're looking at the majority doing between weekly to monthly. Monthly is the highest response rate that we have received. So obviously, it's not continuous deployment. And think about it, when we are now in a digital reality with all that is going on, and you want to push something to production, you want to push a new hot fix into your website or mobile application, and you are in a monthly cadence approach, it's simply way too slow for you to respond to market events. And today it can be quite critical. So you want to make sure that you have good automation pipeline. You want to match the automation pipeline and technologies with your individuals, and do some reverse engineering and audits on your test suite to eliminate noise and just move forward much faster. So I think I've said a lot of the points that are in the recommendation for the previous slide for DevOps, but just to do a short recap. So obviously, looking at your process, okay, and I'm talking here automation, not just your testing. If you have any manual gate points in the cycle, you know, the handoffs from one to the other, documentation, updating of environment, testing against staging and pre-production environments prior to moving to production. There are many individual and specific to organizations gate points that needs to be automated, because you can do everything good up until that point, and then when you have a manual dependency, obviously everything else is just in wait mode for this guy to, or this team to approve for you to move forward. And there can be security, environment related stuff, production provisioning related scenarios, and many more. Unified dev and test team, I think this is true all across the board for all challenges. When you start seeing things breaking, it's when there are siloed teams working individually. They have their own CI, they have their own testing environments, then they have duplicates, and then they have flakiness, and the noise is just becoming double or triple. So obviously, the more you can unify, obviously will optimize your entire pipeline. This is something that I'm actually going to address in a couple of weeks in a different webinar, because I think that if you look at the, I would say, DevOps and testing, Agile testing manifesto, which is talking about testing all types of test cases that brings value. In today's reality, I still see a lot of testing types that aren't even considered to be part of the pipeline. I'm not talking about shift left as a shift left. I'm talking about shift left, but double clicking on the shift left and understanding what of the test cases are actually being performed upon each pull request, upon each build acceptance test cycle. And when you start looking into this, you see security, performance and accessibility, I don't know, UI and exploratory testing. There are a lot of high value test cases that are, equal citizens to the other functional end-to-end and integration testing that are simply either not being automated or are being executed as a afterthought if you have time or if you don't. Okay, and if they are executed, they're only executed in a very small environment, which only include one or two platforms, so the coverage is also an issue. I think that if you want to have an efficient DevOps pipeline that covers not just all different scenarios end to end, but also all of your end user journeys, you want to have also the non-functional testing, the functional, the exploratory, and the user experience related testing, all part of the same cycle of the build acceptance testing. This is how you identify issues faster and move forward with greater digital confidence. Okay, so this is very important. So when you start building your test automation strategy, again, highlighting on the previous or referencing to the previous slide, you want to start looking at a test automation strategy, not just from the ground up, but also from the ground up, divided by test automation types. Again, non-functional, functional, performance, security, UX, and API, of course, integration. Everything needs to be part of your test automation strategy. Okay, if you can leverage service virtualization, cloud platforms to ease the setting up of environments for your business, you will obviously be more agile. You will have a more solid and stable environment that can actually support all of these different activities. You can then obviously grow your CI pipeline. You won't have a functional jobs. You'll have functional jobs. You have non-functional. You have under the non-functional, you can have performance and accessibility and security and many more. So this is something that I think is critical. And if you want to understand what needs to fit into these blocks, you want to understand the high value test scenarios from an end user journey perspective. And also you want to definitely match these test cases within the CI and outside of the CI, again, based on priority, risk-based analysis, and stuff like that. So this is something which is really critical. What we also learned during this research, I wasn't surprised, but it's a very important thing, because I think that's kind of a fad that needs to be eliminated from the world, especially in these days and in the 2020s, when we see so much evolution and innovation around software test automation projects. So we didn't see even one of the responders only using one technology, okay, one test automation framework. The successful ones are actually using a mix of open source and commercials, and in the open source they're using various open source frameworks just to A, match the individual skill set, and B, get more coverage from a test automation scenario perspective. So think about, if you look at the web environment, web testing environment, obviously people use and adopt Selenium, but in today's reality you also see other growing technologies. Recently, Microsoft announced Playwright and Google announced Puppeteer, and these are very good dev front-end solutions, headless browser solutions that you can bake into the pipeline, allowing developers to solidify and make more sense out of their code changes really fast and really early in the pipeline. So when you are actually going to run later on in the pipeline Selenium end-to-end functional scripts, you will already see a much more advanced and robust code repository or code base. So the mix of technologies isn't a wrong thing. Actually, it's a winning approach in today's reality, and you just need to choose. There are so many open source and also commercial frameworks that you can choose. I can tell you from my experience with Perfecto, obviously it's a cloud-based solution for continuous testing on web and mobile. I can say that just over the last few months, we integrated with, I would say, 5 or even more different solutions that are evolving in the market. Some of them are security, some of them are just test automation related, some of them are testing on chatbots. So we integrate with as many open source and other commercial tools just to give you guys, practitioners, the wide range of selection based on your objectives and also your skill sets. So let's be a bit more specific. I gave some high-level things, but when you look at the test automation pyramid that everyone on the call probably have seen a million times or even more, this is still relevant. Okay, we are in 2020 in a different world and different reality, but the test automation pyramid still stands, regardless whether it's a web application or a mobile application. But what is changing is actually the balance between these different testing types based on the cadence of your software release. Obviously, the more time you have, you will try to do more of the, I would say, slow feedback related test cases, which are still important. UI, UX testing, integration testing, and functional testing are very, very important, done both from the API layer as well as from the UI layer. But facing reality, when you have a weekly software iteration, you need to be very lean and you need to be very, very picky about what's entering this software iteration scoping from a testing perspective. So you want to, change the different balance. Let's say if this is a 100% of your test automation strategy, okay, you want to divide the different percentages between the test cases based on the time that is allocated, based on the scope that is entering the product, because there can be releases where you have more UI changes than backend and infrastructure changes. So it's not just a one rule that fits you all. You want to balance and change as you move forward your test automation coverage strategy across the board. Okay, so this is quite important. And how do you choose how to automate? Recently, I ran with one of my colleagues, friends, and also a thought leader and speaker himself in the industry, Thomas Haver, a nice webinar. And while I do have my own slides about what you should automate, I really like this slide. It's short and to the point, so I decided, with his permission, to actually embed his slide here. And when you look at what you should automate, these are his golden rules for what to automate. And I think that these are very, very valuable based on experience tips that we can provide you. So obviously, if the test and task that you are going to tackle is going to be repeated and how often, serves a very good as a very good consideration in a test scenario. Because once you've done the test, once you've written the test, it's yours until a very long time. So you want to continuously maintain it, and you want to make sure that it runs perfectly well across platforms and within the CI. But if you selected a different test based on the wrong reasoning, you're just carrying backlog of noise, of invaluable assets that you may not need. So definitely answering such question is critical. How much time could be saved in opposed to doing it manually? Some of the test cases that you automate are so flaky by nature that not just automating, but automating them once, maintaining them over time may not worth the challenge or the doing them manually once in every sprint. Okay, so not every test that can be automated needs to be automated. That's the bottom line here. And while people know about it, it's very easy. You see a manual test in an Excel spreadsheet or something else. Okay, let's automate it. We have Selenium, we have Appium, we can do it. No, that's not the right reason, because I'll tell you that in a cadence of a few weeks sprints, you're going to have a bunch of additional test cases. So you want to be very, very picky about how you grow your test automation and regression cycle. Because, from the first moment you wrote your test automation scenario, it's now part of your regression until you exclude it. So it's yours. There are other very good considerations here. Quite straightforward, no rocket science here, but still, you need to follow at least some of them. If you don't want to go one by one, at least have some logic behind deciding which test do you automate between one sprint to the next. Okay. So this is a nice slide for you to take away. And by the way, it will contribute to your overall stability of your suite. When we talk about test automation coverage, we often neglect the test environment coverage. And I want to be here a bit more specific when I'm looking at mobile testing. So for mobile testing, and just by the way, web isn't that much different, especially when we are in the era of progressive web applications, which also carry a lot of mobile characteristics. But specifically to the mobile native applications and hybrid applications, if you are not really testing against these different, I would call them persona-driven characteristics like geographies, networks, applications that are running in your background. This is a real smartphone that everyone is using. So when you are using, let's say, a banking application, what you see on this screen, this is what's running in your background. This is your real-time environment. There is no reason why you wouldn't have this exact environment when you are running an Appium test automation scenario or Espresso or XUI test. You need to have this exactly the same in your R&D. Otherwise, you're not really testing against your real environment conditions. In this case, Perfecto can obviously help you. We have the ability to mimic locations, to set different network virtualization profiles, to install various applications that will run in the background on your target device. We can actually play with user behaviors and also inject events like incoming calls and text messages, so you really get the real life environment as your end users are experiencing, and obviously you're able to test as close to the end users as possible. So the main point behind this slide is when you are thinking about what to automate and about test coverage, keep in mind also that test environment or real user environments and conditions are also part of your test automation strategy. It is not always the case. So when you are balancing the three personas, which are business testers, SDET, software developers, and trying to match or successful in matching the different frameworks, and I showed you in the previous research findings that successful organizations are matching between few open source, and commercial tools to get higher test automation coverage and reliability in their testing, you can be obviously much more successful in your journey toward continuous testing. One of my colleagues, evangelist in the market, John Ferguson Smart, drew, and I've seen one of my clients also kind of implementing this model in his daily activities. So it takes a full team. Okay, in the previous slide, I've shown you the SDETs and the developers and the manual or business testers. This is the reality. So when you are defining your features, your sprint, your software iteration, you can call it in any way you like. I call it when you define the next value that you want to develop to your customers. This is how you are aligning between testers, business analysts, and developers, or business testers and developers, toward formalizing, automating. It can be TDD, BDD, or whatever methods, mostly agile testing methods that you want to accept and use. But at the end of the day, when you're going through this journey, obviously you have a lot of check marks along the way, like in this visual, to allow you to identify bottlenecks, identify misunderstandings between the BAs, the testers, the developers, the UI designers across different platforms. And obviously, once you are in alignment, your test automation scenarios, the artifacts, are much more valuable, much more accurate, and the feedback is very, very specific back to your developers upon delivery to your customers. So the main point behind this line, it takes a team, or it takes a village, if you like, sometimes, to really deliver digital confidence to your end users by combining technologies, people across different processes. So I did mention the real environment conditions. What I just wanted to talk here about is a bit from a coverage perspective, but being a bit more specific around test automation coverage for web and mobile, because in today's reality, everyone is digital. Most of the businesses today, even our host today, Techwell, which I had the privilege to present in the recent Star East, which was virtual for the first time ever. We rely today more than ever on the digital assets, which are web applications and mobile applications. So you want to have a very solid digital quality across these platforms, and to do so, you need to have not just a test automation strategy. You also want to have a test automation coverage strategy, and this means the left side and the right side are two sides of the same coin, and these needs to be solid. They need to be always up to date. And while I'm speaking, I suspect that there is an announcement going on from Perfecto about supporting the latest Microsoft Edge 83 and Chrome 83 browsers. We are chasing each and every day, each and every week, the new platforms that are being introduced to the market. If you are maintaining your test automation scripts, but you are running today against, let's say, iOS 13.4, you are not really running against your most and up-to-date end users environments. Okay, while I'm speaking, also iOS 13.5 GA is being released. So the market doesn't stop. The point behind this slide is that you want to have your lab, your test automation environment, all in sync one with another. When you are missing on one, you are missing on both. And that's something that I keep talking with a lot of the industry practitioners, and they're not always getting the bad implications of such outdated environments. Okay, so you want to make sure that both are in sync and one is testing the other exactly towards what's in the market today. To help you, because it's hard to keep up with everything that is going on, no one, I spoke with also some of my customers recently. They are not really sitting on their chairs while they are running their test cases and connected to Apple as they release a new iOS version, or to Microsoft when they are releasing their new Edge Chromium browsers. No one is really able to keep up on a daily basis. This is why, specifically in Perfecto, we are releasing at least twice a year. If we can, we are trying to release even more, but we're releasing at least twice a year an index coverage report that helps the teams handle the last slide left, and which means the test environment updates, meaning you get the most top recommended used smartphones, tablets, and desktop browsers that you can validate or audit against your current test environment and understand, okay, am I outdated or am I up to date, or do I need to change and upgrade one specific operating system? Am I missing a very critical platform? These things are really, really critical to your automation and fast feedback to your developers. At the end of the day, also avoiding a lot of the App Annie reviews that I recently see about a specific application not running well or crashing on a specific device because this client missed testing on the latest and greatest GA version. So this is part of the index report. Taking everything, especially from a mobile perspective, into a one kind of test environment profile or recipe should look like maybe like this, depending on your vertical. But you can see here that if you have a mobile native application, this is how I would look at a test plan, which bundles inside a recommended test environment. You can think about the profile of the users. You can think about their locations, the device that is being used, and tablets. Some of them use tablets and smartphones. Some only use smartphones. The network virtualization or network profile and network conditions that they are operating in, the orientation of the smartphone, and obviously the background apps. So if you bundle all of these considerations into a specific test environment for your mobile app, you are testing as close as possible, obviously with the high value test scenarios, to your users. So summarizing everything that I've just said into one slide that reflects the test automation coverage on a mobile and web related platforms. Use calendars, okay? Leverage market data to keep your lab up to date, both for mobile and web. You can use the index report that I've just referenced. You can use other market reports. You can use your own internal web traffic analytics. But you want to look at these things at least on a quarterly basis and make sure that your lab is always up to date. Continuously put some time to audit and monitor your test automation suite to make sure that they are still relevant, still valuable. You do not have any flakiness. Okay, I've seen a lot of test automation suites that include, let's say, 10% of the test cases that are failing for like 3 cycles in a row, but no one takes a look. They just keep being added to the cycle, and that's a waste. Okay, this is invaluable, takes time, it occupies resources, and maybe hiding. This is the worst thing. Maybe they are hiding an escape defect. Okay, so this needs to be done on at least every 2 or 3 software iterations, and it doesn't need to take too much time. Okay, but it needs to happen. Obviously, the matching between personas, skill set, and tools is one of the most recommended practices, but also matching these technologies and test executions throughout the different pipeline phases is critical. And specifically to that, this is I will soon get to a pipeline, but if you look at these different technologies, okay, you can see that if you mix different technologies for one specific application, let's say we are looking at a responsive web application testing that you want to cover. If you mark Selenium, Cypress, and Headless together with, let's say, Codeless, it can be the Perfecto Codeless or Selenium IDE, and complement with a BDD environment or Catalan, you can have a very good chance to reach over 70-75% test automation, because here you will see developers responsible for this chunk, SDETs responsible for this chunk, and maybe business analysts, business testers will take a chunk from this test automation responsibility, getting you to a very good test automation suite. And oh, by the way, the maintenance is going to be now divided between multiple teams and personas, keeping it a bit more sustainable and maintainable. This is, in my mind, how good looks like. Okay, if you can think about something that you want to look at from a, how CI/CD pipeline needs to look in your organization if you are not agile enough today, this is a very good example from one of my clients that is doing at least 7 concurrent PRs a day. Okay, he's doing daily syncs and merges into the main or dev or major repository, is getting a 1-hour feedback within the noon build that is happening, and is releasing obviously every Thursday, but is doing also within a day an 80% regression cycle, covering as much as possible from his target environments, web and mobile. So when you look at this pipeline, and this is, let's say, a daily pipeline, obviously it requires a high degree of automation, but it also requires a discipline and a mixing and matching of test automation technologies between the different practitioners, because the pull request is a dev-related task. Okay, the developer is owning the pull request. He is the one that needs to get 10-minute feedback. He can get it through a unit testing or API testing framework, or he can get it through an ADAS browser solution. But when we're going towards the noon, this is where a dev and SDET can create a nice smoke-related test suite that gives them, I would say, a good level of confidence prior to the nightly regression, which is going to run in a larger scope, but it will be with a higher confidence because few cycles already happened earlier that day. Okay, so this is, in my mind, a nice recipe, taking a lot of the things that I've just presented to you with technologies, processes, practitioners, stability and automation and coverage all into one pipeline. So this is, in my mind, the key takeaway from this webinar to you guys. And oh, by the way, when you look at the famous, because it's the second time I'm showing you the test pyramid, you can also think about when you are covering in the different pipelines, especially for mobile, you can also look at how do you bundle real devices and virtual ones in a single pipeline, and you can see the different phases mandate using different platforms. Obviously, when you're in the unit testing, like every pull request, you can definitely leverage simulators and emulators to get fast feedback. It's done from your own environment or through Perfecto. When you are doing integration testing and other higher level UI end-to-end functional testing, this is when you're starting to mix up until you reach the level that you really want to test as your end users. If you go back to my slide about the persona-driven testing, this is where you want to focus only on real smartphones and tablets. As I mentioned earlier in the webinar, the research was able to find for us a nice process or practices within the organizations by enterprises using both commercial and open source mixed tools. But what we are going to see if we're talking a bit futuristic, talking about later this year and 2021, we're starting to see, because testing is going to be done in every phase, but the applications themselves are also getting smarter, and they're going to become, as Forster just recently mentioned or called them, AI-infused applications. So you are going to start thinking a bit more forward with a mix of not just commercial and open source tools, but also commercial, open source, and AI-based testing tools, just to complement AI and smart related stuff, understanding large scale and data and big data impact on your product quality, and also being more robust in the way your test automation scripts are running and maintained. We are hearing a lot of self-healing, like I'm presenting here. We are hearing a lot of visual related testing abilities using AI, and we are also looking at automated code reviews and risk-based code development approaches that are using AI and machine learning. So if looking forward towards the second part of this year and maybe obviously 2021, take everything that I've just presented in this webinar, but also start considering baking into your process and strategies AI and machine learning tools, because they are evolving. Perfecto is one of the tools that is also looking into baking more and more smart abilities with AI and machine learning, either through codeless or through our reporting and the self-healing of our lab. So we definitely are looking into AI and machine learning as an enabler for more modern continuous testing abilities. Finally, before wrapping up this webinar and leaving room for questions, this is taken from my previous book called Continuous Testing for DevOps Professional. So this is a nice cut of metrics that can give you I would say, the visibility into how valuable is your continuous testing at a given time. And you can aggregate, you can make your own averages, you can actually add your own metrics if you have them. But what I liked about this set of metrics is that they are divided into speed or velocity, quality, and cost. So when you can measure and see the value that you are getting from different, I would say, verticals of the business, such as the velocity, quality, and cost, you are definitely in a better place to improve your overall practices, make smart decisions, or eliminate noise and flakiness. So average test execution time definitely can slow your entire CI/CD feedback. Okay, if you do not have proper requirement coverage and traceability, obviously you have blind spots which can risk in escape defects as well. Defect leakage into production. This is something that is easy to measure, but if you do not measure, obviously you do not know. So there are plenty of, actually 27 metrics here, and I can definitely think of many more, but try and build some kind of a metric strategy that can allow you to understand where you stand in the continuous testing maturity path towards, obviously, continuous delivery. Finally, so what is required to deliver a top-notch digital UX or digital confidence for your mobile and web application? You want to work with a stable and scalable platform for your web and mobile testing, because as I mentioned earlier in the webinar, if you have developed good test automation artifacts, but your environment that is running these test cases, whether this is a mobile cloud or a web cloud, and it's not stable enough, you won't get the high value, and you will definitely be, focusing on maintaining an environment rather than moving forward with a high delivery or high quality delivery of your software. Detect defects earlier in the cycle. You cannot do it by siloed approach. You need to be able to plug your test automation scripts early in the process. Shift left is not just for it's not just an acronym. It's very, very important. But shifting left needs to include all testing types, including non-functional, security, accessibility, performance, and stuff like that. Fixing bugs faster, and this is the developer related stuff, the productivity, and to do so, the developers are no longer just the unit test owners. They can do much more, and they should do much more in their PR fast feedback activities. If you go back to my pipeline chart, the recommended pipeline chart, they have 2 times a day in the noon build to impact the quality of their code changes, and also in their PR fast feedback cycle that they're running, so they can have at least 2 moments a day or 2 events a day to allow them to identify and fix bugs faster. This is the MTTR kind of metric, mean time to resolution, that we are all talking about. Be proactive about reducing risk of escape defects. What does it mean? It means that you need to look into your test reports, look at noise that is coming into the test reports, and maximize or optimize the test automation suite, so you're only running high value test cases. Two times or 3 times seeing a failure test case in your report because an element wasn't found or because of a pop-up. Obviously, it's not a bug. It might hide a bug, but this is noise and needs to be eliminated in a proactive manner. In Perfecto, we have this notion of root cause analysis or failure analysis that we actually show you in different clusters through machine learning which software failures are attributed to which root cause, allowing you as a test automation manager the ability to decide what to do with these failures. So in the next release or in the next regression cycle, you have a more clean test report to look at. So with that, I just want to move into the question and summarize, because I haven't talked too much about Perfecto. So what Perfecto brings to the table is obviously a continuous testing, a unified continuous testing solution for DevOps teams to optimize their release cycle for both desktop web applications and mobile, all in the cloud. We have the largest cloud in the world. We are part of Perforce. And what we believe is that if you have a unified solution that consists of a solid creation ability and execution at scale in a robust lab that is cloud-based, together with a smart reporting and analytics, it puts you in a very advanced stage for you to move forward in your journey towards CI/CD. And remember, as mentioned earlier in this webinar, CI/CD is a continuous process. It's not something that you do today and next week you are immune. You need to have something that is maintainable and run 24/7, 36, 5 days a year. So this is really important, and this is why we believe you need to have all of these pillars in one single solution. Before moving to questions, if you want to check us out or follow us, we are also on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube. We have the Perfecto.io. You can do a free trial, free of charge, and use your Selenium existing scripts, Appium, or whatever to go through the Perfecto cloud on mobile and desktop web applications. So I strongly recommend that you do so if you're interested in advancing your test automation. And with that, if there are any questions, I'll be happy to take them right now.
Great, thanks, Eran. We already do have a question from the audience, but everybody feel free to continue typing in your questions for Eran over on the left in that questions and answers panel. And we do have a few minutes, so we'll get through as many as we have time for. Sure. Okay, first one for you here. This is when you were talking about optimizing efficiencies, I believe. This person says, one of your suggestions was to unify the dev and test teams. So how do you suggest that we do that?
This is a very tough question. Unifying dev and test teams, and I know that because Perfecto did the exact same thing a couple of years ago. We moved actually from a monolithic environment to a microservices, and then we actually broke our R&D into different squads, and then baked into each team both testing engineers and also developers. So obviously mixing or unifying dev and test teams needs to match the technology that is now being developed, and B, it needs to come with a very thought approach led by management. Obviously it's a management decision, so executives from both R&D, director of testing or QA needs to design and actually divide the different feature teams based on skill set, because as mentioned in this webinar, just having a unified dev and test feature teams is fine, but you want to have the right developers and testers working together, both from a social related stuff but also from a business and technology fitness. So you can do it. It needs to be led by management. It needs to fit the technology and the skill set of each individual. And I wouldn't start by dividing the entire organization into feature teams. I will start small with a pilot, with one project, maybe a new project as a pilot, and then drill it or expand it into other parts of the organization. But definitely do it in a process, it's not all at once.
Okay, good advice there. Thank you. And I'm sorry, but we are just about out of time, so I think that'll be the only question that we got to. But if anyone still does have a question you maybe didn't have time to type in, feel free to still type that in the questions and answers window, click submit, and that will send us all an email so we can get that addressed for you anyway. So that will end our event for today. I would like to thank Eran for his time and Perfecto by Perforce